Good evening, guys. Welcome back to my channel. This is going to be my attempt at a full-scale review of the Detroit Lions draft. We'll go through each pick. I'll generally just be talking about it. I will show, some graphics like the one you see on the screen for Blake Miller, but also our website, draftsignal.pro, where you'll be able to see, some evaluations, and even if you wish to, while I talk, some of the film that's displayed. Look, I think Detroit's draft was a fun one to watch from Thursday and Friday night. I didn't get to watch Saturday live, to be honest with you. I was doing a couple of things with my son as far as baseball goes. But let's just get with the picks, okay? And then I'll talk about a little bit of the flow of the draft and how it worked for Detroit. The attempt or near attempt, I guess, to trade up with the Ravens. And then, ironically, trading in front of the Ravens in round two. Just a really cutthroat action by Brad Holmes. But Blake Miller, right tackle, played a ton of snaps at Clemson. In my opinion, extremely athletic. When you watch him move around, you think you're looking at a guy who's like 6'2", 290 or 295 as an offensive lineman. Like, okay, he's really quick. I mean, he's got that kind of feet, in my opinion. He's very decisive in his approach to blocks. I'm talking about whether it's a run or a pass play. He's got great strength to dig out defensive ends, outside linebackers, edge defenders. I'm talking about like base blocks. So defensive end lined up outside of him. He's just trying to turn that guy out and kind of expand that B gap. And that's something to me that kind of separates the guys who are, well, really NFL level tackles anyway, but guys that get taken early is when they get those base blocks, not a down block, not a pull scheme away from them, but just one-on-one. I've got a 5 technique or a 9 technique, and I've got to step to him and block him. And not just hold ground, but expand the B gap. Even if you're only expanding it by like a 1.5 feet, along with all of that, he's got the athleticism, the speed to get out in front on counter schemes away from him, that kind of skip counter stuff that Clemson used. He's very adept at executing down blocks, essentially securing the front side of a gap scheme. I think he's got really good timing, placement, on his hand strikes, whether it's in pass pro or the run game. He lands shots. He looks annoying to play against, maybe even angering for some defensive ends, because he lands shots that he shouldn't when he's in a typical pass protection. Now, he's got a little bit of a unusual kick step at times. He's got multiple sets. There's two different versions of like a jump set, if you will, almost a more patient, not completely vertical set. That vertical set is often, characterized, or when you watch the film, it kind of gives it away. He's got a really big kick in his outside foot, his right foot. But he lands quick little shots in his pass pro. I think he's got a deep pass set bag. He reminds me of Roger Rosengarten in a lot of ways. The only difference is he's bigger, thicker, taller, with longer arms than Rosengarten. I think Miller's got a lot of confidence. He's got a really strong left-hand turn. His left hand is his inside hand because he's a right tackle on those base blocks that I kind of talked about earlier. Basically trying to expand or widen the B gap for running backs to access. I really enjoyed watching his film. He does utilize what I would consider to be like 3 different stances. Does a pretty good job playing from either one. I'm going to reference Will Campbell a little bit. Will Campbell at LSU had a stance that I didn't think he could play out of. Of course, most people spend time talking about, his shorter arm length. Big guys like Blake Miller, big athletic guys, they can play out of that more upright stance. The what you see on the screen right now is his almost more upright stance. He's got a little bit of a hybrid stance and a 3-point stance that he uses. I do wonder how he will, deal with the elite of the elite speed rushers that force him to get into that vertical set consistently. But look, that's a potential issue for many offensive tackles in the rookie year. Blake Miller's got a lot of game, in my opinion. I would say he's the most balanced guy that I saw film of. Personally, my favorite in this class, I'm talking about as far as a tackle, my favorite in this class was Max Ahinachor. But Detroit felt like Miller was more ready to go, probably because of, the high number of snaps that he played, his experience. He's very durable. Played every snap since his freshman year. I think I had him as a late first-round pick, but when I say late, I mean like somewhere in the 22 to 24 range. Detroit did the math once Proctor went off the board at 12, I think. A couple of observations for you that are independent of my evaluations. First, I do a lot of Ravens content with a friend of mine. His YouTube channel is Edgar Allen. And during round one, we were live streaming, and he had not watched a lot of film of Miller. And when Detroit took him at pick 17, EA immediately fired up our website, draftsignal.pro, and watched the significant amount of film that we have there. So let me be clear about what I'm talking about. Is that he pulled up the film that we have at the bottom of his player profile, his being Blake Miller, and just watched all these plays. And he was, probably within 2 minutes, he was quiet for a couple of minutes and then said, Coach, this is a really good player. You were right. He was like, this guy's very athletic. He plays like someone who's not 6'6", 320, 325. It was just really cool for me as I thought Blake Miller was a great fit for Detroit all along. I thought he was a better fit than Caden Proctor, and, that's how it worked out. The whole trade options or what's come out now that apparently Brad Holmes and EDC were on the phone together, Eric DeCosta, the GM for the Ravens. And my guess is that was after Proctor was taken off the board at 12. The idea here for me being that Proctor going to Miami, I think it was at 12. Hopefully I'm not wrong there. That's a time period when Brad Holmes and the front office in Detroit start doing the math. Okay, who's going to be there for us at 17 if some of these other teams, take guys? Of course, Ruben Bain is still on the board as well. My suspicion, and from what I have been able to kind of try to glean or put together, is that the original conversation took place after pick 12, after Proctor went off the board. And then once Ty Simpson gets taken by the Rams, the math is totally different. Because at that point you have, Bain is still on the board, Ioane, who the Ravens took, Sadiq, and then the Lions are sitting there at 17. So at that point in time, if you ask me, they probably understood that they didn't need to trade up with the Ravens, essentially swap first-round picks. And so that's why I think that justifies to me, or it makes sense now, why Eric DeCosta said that, once we got on the phone the second time with that team, he wouldn't name who it was. I suspect it was the Lions, that the offer changed. And so, credit to Brad Holmes for being able to adjust that way. A couple of things here, and again, I'm going away from my own evaluation. I've mentioned Chris Aguilera, who's a Ravens fan, and he does offensive line work every year. I think it's of the highest quality, and he's got an evaluation on our site that is independent of my own. I mean, he's a Ravens fan. Chris doesn't cover any other teams or attempt to like I do. And number one. And number two, this eval that he wrote was written about 2 months ago. Well, maybe 6 or 7 weeks ago. So it's not like this evaluation you're seeing on screen here is something that I'm coming up with in order to make you feel good about the Blake Miller pick. It's his evaluation that was written, weeks ago. And you can go check it out for yourself, as well as the film that's at the bottom of his player profile at draftsignal.pro. Website that we're obviously really proud of, but it allows me now to try to reinforce my eval or opinion of Miller, which I think is very high. It's a great setup for Detroit's offensive line, in my opinion, for 2026. Sewell as the left tackle, Mahogany left guard, Cade Mays the center, Radledge the right guard, and then Miller the right tackle. You got backup tackles with Manu and Larry Borum, whose film doesn't look bad, I have to admit. Guards or interior guys, Juice Scruggs, who came over from the Texans, Penn State guy, Miles Frazier, LSU, he'll be entering his second year, and then I think Colby Sorsdahl. I think that sets up for a quality starting lineup and then a lot of depth. To me, last year there was a big drop-off around that time when Mahogany got hurt. And I know Decker was dealing with injuries, and Sewell played hurt for much of the year. I think there was a couple of games where Sewell, if he'd been any other guy, may not have even suited up. My point is that five being healthy with Borum as the primary backup tackle, and then, Frazier, who showed some ability, to be honest with you, later in the season, Sorsdahl and Scruggs on the interior, is a pretty good group. I love the pick at number 17. For me, it'd be an A+. So let's move on to round two, the Derrick Moore selection. Again, my description is cutthroat. If my interpretation and understanding is correct, that Baltimore and Detroit were briefly, or I guess twice, discussing a trade, after pick 12, and then, maybe during or after pick 13, the dynamic changed. it's kind of crazy because Holmes was talking to EDC and then trades up in front of him from 50 to 44 to scoop us, I guess, for Derrick Moore. Who do I like better? I'll get to that in a minute. What I mean is, Derrick Moore versus Zion Young. But to describe the whole dynamic or progression for a moment, R. Mason Thomas goes to the Chiefs, who, I have to admit, they had an exceptional draft. Mansour Delane, in my opinion, fantastic corner. He's a Maryland guy, so, I'm a little partial. But I said these things before the draft, and it frustrates me and upsets me that Delane goes to the Chiefs because I want to root for the guy. He's from about an hour where I live, and now he's with the Chiefs. So I'm conflicted. I want to root for him because he's a local kid, and I want to see him succeed. But, I don't want the Chiefs to win us another Super Bowl, especially don't even want to see him get to one. But in any case, R. Mason Thomas goes to the Chiefs at 40. Cassius Howell at 41. So you've got picks 42 and 43, then the Jets at 44. The Jets already had Bailey, right? David Bailey from pick 2. Baltimore's at 45. I think the math here is, the Lions wanted Derrick Moore, point blank. And once those two guys, Thomas and Howell, went off the board, I think that Detroit, got on the phone and said, let's make this trade happen because they did the math smartly. I think that they were prepared. Now, to some degree, I almost wondered if Zion Young was actually a better fit for Detroit from what he's capable of now. He's a bull rush guy, collapses the pocket, big, strong. Not that Derrick Moore's not, right? Derrick Moore's 6'3.5", about 255, 260 pounds. But Moore is more refined. Moore's been coached better, flat out. And I said this in my Ravens draft reaction video that EA and I put out Sunday night, that Moore has been better coached. He's more technical, far more aware than Zion Young, and more versatile. It makes sense, right? Jesse Minter was his defensive coordinator in 22 and 23, who's now the head coach for the Ravens. And then Wink Martindale, former defensive coordinator of the Ravens, was his defensive coordinator in 24 and 25. Oh, by the way, the position coach at Michigan, Pernell McPhee, who was a certified ass kicker in the NFL, you guessed it, drafted by the Ravens, but he also played for the Bears and the Commanders. They may have been known as the Redskins at the time. Point being, I understand why Detroit thought that Moore would be earmarked for Baltimore. And yes, I do actually think of the play styles for what the Ravens defense does versus what Detroit's has done under Kelvin Shepard, although I do think some of that could change or alter or evolve maybe. Yeah, it fits better with Moore in Baltimore and Young in Detroit, but that's not what Brad Holmes and those guys wanted. They've got a well-trained outside linebacker / edge defender who comes with and Moore he's got pre-installed versatility for real. Again, coached by an NFL edge defender in Pernell McPhee, who was one of my favorite players, to be honest with you. I expect to see Moore lined up to the boundary a lot. There's some overlap between Moore and, don't get alarmed or offended, and Derrick Barnes. And what I mean by that is Barnes could line up at edge defender, and he'll probably play a lot of inside linebacker this year to the boundary. He'll be the will. I think Rodriguez is going to get a lot of time. But Moore's really good at dropping out in coverage. And in fact, at Michigan, he did so a lot of times to the field, which is, the college hashes are wider. So when the ball's on one hash, the field side's really wide. Compared to the NFL, the hashes are closer to each other. They're closer or more centered. 18 feet, 6 inches apart, I think, versus the college, which is, huge. I like Moore's game a lot. I liked his game before the draft. And in fact, this is our player profile page for him at draftsignal.pro. He doesn't have any testing here. My evaluation's on the site. You're welcome to read that on your own time. Dan Viennes, Seahawks Forever. He wrote this weeks ago. And it gives you a great idea of Moore, and I think it goes along with what I'm saying. I'm not huge on pass rush win rate, but that one's pretty good, 20% essentially. Dan projected him as a first, second round pick. That's about where I had him as well. In fact, the last part of my evaluation, at this point, I think we're going to date these in the future. We're going to put the date that it was written, so I can prove to you that I didn't write this tonight or before I produced this, but word for word, I expected him to be taken off the board in the 50 to 70 range. Ravens, Lions, Chargers, strong possibilities. And of course, the Lions traded up to 44 and got him. There's film if you want to go check it out. It's a one play each, though. Couple against Washington. This is against a tight end. The middle play, the second one, it's against a tight end in pass pro. His game against USC in 25 was amazing. I really like his game. I'm not a Michigan, to be honest with you, I'm not a Michigan college fan. I tend to, root for Maryland and Penn State, to be honest with you, or at least I pay attention to Penn State. I don't really have a college team that I watch and root for every week. I just don't have time. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about more technically. You can look at these. It's only 3 plays. I need to edit together a compilation so you guys can see it. But I've shared a ton on Twitter, and I've shared a ton in the Lions Discord as well. I'll post up the Twitter link in the description here as this video premieres. I'm recording it Monday night to get it out for you guys, hopefully by 10:30 p.m., but very strong and physical player. He relies on his bull rush a lot, right? He's strong enough to do so at the college level. He's going to have to develop more moves, in my opinion, if he wants to be an instant pass rush weapon in Detroit. I like his potential, like right now, meaning for 2026, because of the effort, athleticism, quickness, versatility with some stunts. I like him to be a 6-sack guy this year coming up. I'm talking about, I don't want to say best case scenario, but that's what I can foresee from the way that Derrick Moore plays football. I don't see him right now having the moves to win on outside rush pass. Cross chops, speed rushes, etc., against starting level tackles. If that was his go-to thing. I will say this. Having said that, Derrick Moore's inside rush moves are quick. They're decisive. He catches people off guard. Again, watch the USC game if you can find Derrick Moore USC highlights on YouTube, or go look at the stuff I posted on Twitter. I think we can expect to see, obviously, Moore and DJ Wonnum splitting time depending on situation. Hutchinson probably going to be to the field, in my opinion, a lot, and Moore or Wonnum into the boundary from the standpoint of those guys being, less athletic than Hutchinson, less devastating, less impactful. In addition, I do wonder about like a veteran edge, designated pass rusher type guy being brought in for some 3rd and 8s. Essentially, and I'll talk about the defensive tackle group a little bit later, what was taken in the draft, whether or not it's enough for the interior defensive line. I will say this, against the run, Derrick Moore is very reliable, incredibly violent. He can set the edge, but he also is very bright about the type of run concept that he's getting, the type of block, okay? He knows when he can kind of allow the edge to expand and someone's fitting underneath of him. There was a couple of times where there's run plays to his side on film, and I forget what game it was, but there's a nickel who's blitzing like to his inside. And so Moore kind of allowed the tight end to kind of work to him because, the force defender, the guy who would be to Moore's outside, the nickel, is now blitzing in the C gap. And so I think he's extremely aware, very well trained. I love his potential on 1st and 10. 3rd and 6 between him and Wonnum and or, a designated pass rusher if somebody like a Clowney was available. I think Clowney's earmarked for Seattle, but, there's rumors that they're going to sign Dante Fowler, who was with Dallas last year. Moore plays with a great motor. I think he takes advantage of every opportunity early in the season. First of all, I don't want him to play any special teams. I think he's too valuable. I think he's too valuable long-term for this team, for this franchise, given where he was drafted and what Detroit needs out of him. They need some production against the pass. They need him to be really good against the run. As well, they need him to be helped for Aiden Hutchinson. Early in the season, I see 32, 35 snaps a game, something like, I'm talking about first 4 or 5 games, till he gets acclimated. Wonnum's a good player too, right? I will say this, as far as the pass rush stuff and his total number of sacks and all that, I've heard, I've read that conversation. I forget where I found this from. It was on Twitter. Someone, like one of the national analysts, was talking about how against true pass rush situations, he had a 36% win rate, and that was 10th among edge defenders in college. I don't know. I'm quite sure, Reuben Bain, David Bailey, maybe Romello Height, etc., were the guys ranked above him. Don't just take my word for it. Obviously, my eval is there. You've got an evaluation from a professional level analyst, if you ask me, and Dan Viens. I'm sure that Will Rock has done one on his channel. Go check out what he said about him. Will may have done an eval for me for this site, and I just don't have it up at this point in time, so my apologies for that. I think he's very versatile. Derrick Moore's very versatile, tenacious. He's got great strength. He's an interesting pick for me given the versatility. And what I mean by that is what Detroit did last year with Shepard. They're a little bit more man-centric, very similar to under Aaron Glenn. Now, there were other options there between that 44 and 50 range. I love that Brad Holmes went out and addressed tackle in round 1 and edge in round 2, which is what I think a lot of us said that's what they have to do. And so, great. I will just briefly read off what else was there, which I think just supports that this was, the best option available. And Detroit wanted more compared to a Zion Young or a Gabe Yakas. But when he's selected on the board, Avion Terrell, the corner / possible nickel slot from Clemson, D'Angelo Pons, one of my favorites in the draft, Gabe Yakas, the other edge defender from the Big Ten, Illinois. He went to the Patriots. I think it was 55 was the pick selection. The next couple of edge defenders taken, all right? Romello Height to the 49ers early in the 3rd round. He's a DPR type guy, pass rusher. Lighter, been around a long time. He's older. Moore's 23, but Romello Height, I think, is already 25, or he turns 25 soon. Jason Barham went to the Cowboys at 92. So later in the 3rd round, great pick there, man. Barham, another Michigan guy, obviously from Maryland originally. Round 4, you've got Dennis Sutton. He went from Penn State. He went to the Packers. Wesley Williams from Duke. To me, the math supported the move, and what I mean is trading up from 50 to 44. I know that if you had another 4th round pick, maybe a safety or a defensive tackle, something like that. I will talk about that dynamic a little bit here when I talk about Jimmy Rolder. Hopefully I'm saying that name correctly because I'm going to be saying it a lot, so I don't want to be annoying. I'll talk about that, trading up. I don't have a problem with it because, like I said, this is the guy that Detroit wanted, and I'm glad they got him. I think he's going to be a really good player. All right, so Rolder, to be honest with you, caught me a little bit by surprise. For a couple of reasons. But I'll talk about his numbers and what I've seen. Obviously, I've watched the film. Derrick Moore and then Jason Barham, one of my favorites. I mean, both of those guys are from Maryland. They both played at St. Francis High School in Baltimore City, which is a private school that's, they turned into like a top 10 in the country high school football team. But I've seen Rolder on the field. In 2025, he had a lot of impact. I think 70-plus tackles, 7 TFLs. We didn't have him on our site, I will say that. 2 sacks, 1 interception. He's been at Michigan his whole college career, I should say. He played for Wink Martindale the last 2 years and played for Jesse Minter 22 and 23. Actually didn't get on the field a whole lot. I think injuries was a issue twice. I do wonder, just based on my evaluation of him is incomplete, okay? So I will go watch the film, and what I do when I watch the film is I post stuff up in the Lions Discord. I post stuff up on Twitter because I don't put college film on my YouTube channel at all for obvious reasons. My evaluation of him is incomplete, but to me, based on what I have seen, I wonder if he would have been available longer than the 4th round where they took him. Nonetheless, they got him. So here's the inside linebacker group, right? Jack Campbell, as good as it gets at Mike linebacker. Derek Barnes, probably going to move to Will, but you got Malcolm Rodriguez as well. So Shepard does have the capability of playing that 3 inside linebacker look. Damone Clark, really fast inside linebacker, smaller. Holder is also quick, lighter on his feet than some of the other guys in this draft at inside linebacker. Maybe even lighter on his feet than Barnes. Rodriguez is a good cover guy, in my opinion. I think Rolder is a will into the boundary as far as positionally. On defense, he's going to be a special teams guy if in fact he makes the team or he's active on Sundays. Eric Hunter, who's a UDFA from Morgan State, which is an HBCU in Baltimore, he actually already signed. He already signed a 3-year contract. I think it's for like $1 million a year. I know it's not guaranteed. Well, some of it's guaranteed. I believe it's like $175,000 guaranteed. Like, amazing, man. Eric Hunter's kind of a rugged guy. I actually did have him on the site. He was a local guy that I knew a little bit about. In any case, Holder, he's a will. The options that were there when he's taken. All right, let's do this. Who was on the board? And keep in mind, they had traded one of the 4 to move up and take Moore, which again, I think the math supported that. I got no problem with that decision at all. I'm less of a fan of this pick, I have to be honest with you. It kind of reminds me of the Ravens in their 2025 draft taking inside linebacker by the name of Teddy Buchanan. Actually, he played well. He received recognition his rookie year, let me put it that way. But known issues in pass coverage for Buchanan, and he wasn't going to play Mike because we had Roquan Smith. So he's a will. Well, the will linebacker into the boundary, you got to be able to play pass coverage. That's Rolder's specialty. That'll be what Barnes and Rodriguez do. I wonder if this situation with Rolder is similar to Buchanan, that those guys would have been there 20, 30, or even 40 picks later. Now, that does, however, line up with my evaluation of the whole draft. And what I mean is there's a lot of merging or blurred window between like the early third-round picks even into the early fifth. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit with Keith Abney here in a moment, who I really like. As far as Rolder goes, I have 3 games filmed to rewatch where I've got just the end zone angle, so it'll be a whole lot quicker for me. Again, I'll share it on Twitter and the Lions Discord. I've seen him play because watching Barham and Moore, Rolder just didn't stick out to me. But, he's on the field next to 2 guys who got drafted in the top 90. For me to see Barham at 92 and then Rolder a little bit later, hey, that reflects well on the Michigan program. He might be better than I think, just my memory served. Again, I'm willing to go watch the film because I'm serious about this. And I feel a little bit remiss that we didn't have his player profile on draftsignal.pro. Had seen the film, and if someone had asked me prior to the draft where I thought he would go, I'd say late 5th into the 6th. And let me actually parlay that, what I just said there, into a conversation that's come up since the draft was over, and that's about the whole consensus thing, number one, which I think is related to whether so many teams reached or not. And those reaches seem to be discussions that were, mostly second, third, and fourth round. Dejon Stribling would be one, the first pick of the second round to the San Francisco 49ers. I know a guy who's a receiver guru, Coach Evans. His YouTube is Sip to Tally. He's a Ravens content creator, and he thought that Dejon Stribling was like the number 3 or number 4 receiver in the entire draft. He was that high on him. Maybe he didn't say number 3, but his point was he was the second receiver that he evaluated because he liked him that much. I mean, I think evaluating this draft was more difficult unless you watch the film. And when I say that, I mean a lot of it. A lot of the film. I personally did, I think, 63 evaluations that are on our website, draftsignal.pro. We had another 12 guys submit evals. 12, when I say 12 guys, I mean 12 different evaluators, what on our website is called collaborators. And so real briefly, I would just display that so you guys can see what I'm talking about. We're talking about Rolder, whether he would have been available 30 picks later. And I think it gets to the point, which is there's a real blurring of some of these rounds because you had a lot of talent in the third, fourth, and even fifth round. And that speaks to Keith Abney, the pick in round 5. But anyway, here's some of them. You guys are obviously very familiar with Will Rock and Easy from Woodward Sports Network. The rest of these guys, are probably less familiar with, besides myself and some of the ones that I've mentioned, EA, Edgar Allen, Coach Evans. Down near the bottom, there's a couple of other people, that you won't be familiar with. But the point is, there were so many people that provided evaluations. Many of them said the same thing, which is, hey, this particular player, I could see him being taken in the 3rd round. I can see him being taken in the 5th, but I really like him in any case. And that must have been how Brad Holmes and the front office felt about this guy. I do want to reference 3 players that speak to that point about whether consensus was broken in this draft, whether this draft was more difficult to evaluate players. I think it was for some. I want to talk about some guys who went the other way, guys who were projected late. Eli Raridan, Jalen Husky, who's another Maryland kid that I have some knowledge of. Both of those guys went in the 3rd round. And then a player who, it's kind of unbelievable for me. I've actually read 2 people say that Traydon Stukes was a reach for the Raiders in round 2. I thought Traydon Stukes might go late in the 1st. Comparing him to Emmanuel McNeil Warren, I thought Stukes was just a better player. I get it, though. There were so many DBs drafted or draftable for Arizona. I'm talking about Arizona University that Traydon Stukes played at, that maybe someone got them confused. In any case, my point here for Rolder, I'm willing to say that I'm open to the fact that, the difference between him being taken in the 4th and the 5th round might just come down to the front office and consensus, or, obviously what I think doesn't matter, but that really means there's just a lot of talent. And so here's what I mean. In the 4th round, 4th into the 5th round, the following inside linebackers were taken. One of them is my favorite, but I'm getting away with one by calling him an inside linebacker, and that's Kyle Lewis from Pittsburgh. A great playmaking ability, great coverage skills, but he's only 220 pounds. And he went near the end of the 4th round. Bryce Becker from Oregon was a 4th-round pick that a lot of people had projected. I mean, some people thought he'd go in the 7th or go be a UDFA. My man EA, Edgar Allen, he thought he was a 4th, 5th-round pick. Becker, if you don't know, was drafted by Major League Baseball and walked on to Oregon, actually played 2 sports there. Kendall Daniels is like a hybrid linebacker nickel from Oklahoma, who was drafted, I think, in the 4th round after Rolder went off the board. In addition, Wade Woodaz from Clemson. And so my point is, all of those guys, similar positions, undersized, quick inside linebacker, smart. Daniels, kind of a hybrid nickel linebacker. Lewis, same thing. Rolder might have been taken 20, 30 picks sooner than I think, but in my opinion, Detroit's just going with their board, and they're just going with what and I like that. I like that about Brad Holmes. I'll be honest with you. I like that those guys, stick to their board. I venture to say that 99% of NFL front offices do. They don't give a damn about consensus and what people like us think. But in any case, I'm willing to go rewatch the Michigan film from the end zone angle only and take a look at Rolder and maybe let people know a little bit more in detail what I think of him after that. I have a lot to say about Keith Abney. Really reminds me of a guy that and of course Abney was taken in the 5th round. That's displayed on the screen, 157. It's a little shocking to me that him and Chandler Rivers from Duke were taken in the 5th round. Both smaller arms, I guess in the 5'9", 5'10", 190 range. Both of these guys, Keith Abney and Chandler Rivers from Duke, I think offer 3rd-round talent. Both are really good football players who can move around a little bit. Abney, I'm sure you guys know by now, 2025 he had 12, I think maybe 14 PDs. Either one of them, I'm not sure. I don't have the numbers in front of me right now, but 2 interceptions. 2024, he had 3 interceptions. Texas, a couple of the games that I watched, Texas Tech, right? That's weird film because Texas Tech admittedly did not have a great offense, right? That was proven in the college football playoff. Arizona State got blown out by Utah. I did watch that game. Anyway, you can listen to what I have to say about Abney, and while also considering, again, what Dan Viennes has to say about him. His projection was from the 3rd round, and Dan wrote this weeks ago, so he didn't attempt to make you guys feel better about the selection. This was written before the draft, and in my opinion, he's very smooth in movement, he being Abney. A balanced corner. He's one of those guys that can vacillate between off coverage and press coverage. His press is more like modern press, though, and what I mean by that is it's not overly physical. It's pressed up on the line of scrimmage, and he's really good, got great feet at matching the receiver's release. A couple of times I've seen him get crossed up because he's not making contact. He's not punching, with either hand. He did seem to move around based on matchup, and what I mean is at first in the Utah game, he was lined up on the left for like the first possession and a half, and then he started switching into the boundary. So there's a lot going on. Texas Tech, he was to the left for like the first 2 possessions, and then started switching sides. Either, depending on where the ball was, he was into the boundary. He's a really good football player. He had a diving interception against West Virginia that was badass. I think both him and Chandler Rivers, because of their size or lack thereof as far as measurables, that they could end up playing a lot for their teams. Rivers for the Ravens, and Abney for Detroit. Don't have any film of him, to be honest with you, that was put up on the website because I really finished my work on all of this stuff 2 or 3 weeks ago, and so I do have significant film now. We'll post it up on Twitter tonight. You're welcome to check that out. I like the room that Detroit has created here. I think Abney pushes Rakestraw and I think it's Isaiah who came over from the Bucks. It's a deep secondary. Whether you're happy with so many guys being in this size range or not, that's a different story. Rock Ya-Sin's back, which I think is great because he provides great depth, reliability if he has to get on the field like he did in 2025. Terrion Arnold returning, DJ Reed returning. I think Abney's got great timing. I think he's got great timing on shorter routes, in particular, in breaking routes that are like 5 to 7 yards depth. He's got smaller frame, but he's lethal coming downhill. And what I mean is he arrives on time, whether it's to break up a pass, make a hit on the receiver, or to make a tackle against the run game. I love his game. It's, again, the reason why I've mentioned comparing him or contrasting him with Rivers from Duke is because it's so much fun to watch their film. They almost both remind me of D'Angelo Pons. The only thing is Pons is a whole lot smaller in stature than those guys, but all three of them recognize things quickly. In particular from off coverage. They recognize the route, break on. There's some times with Abney, all three of those guys, where and D'Angelo Pons went in round 2, right? So Rivers and Abney go in round 5. You might be like, why are you comparing those guys? I see similarities in them, in that many times I watch the play and I rewind it, slow motion rewind it, slow motion forward. I'm like, how is he reacting already? If it turned out that he knew the play, I wouldn't be surprised. And I think, and what I'm doing is I'm trying to paint for you the idea that Abney reacts extremely quickly, but also he's very prepared. He played into the boundary a lot. So in college, you knew where he was going to be. If you wanted to target him as a quarterback or offensive coordinator, you know where he's going to be generally. He does a lot of things right. He's quick enough to get the job done. 4.4, 6, 40. I think this gives Kelvin Shepherd a lot of options and talent, depth at corner. He could, talk about him playing nickel because of his arm length. Much of his film is outside corner into the boundary. He reminds me of DJ Reed as well, and smart, combative. And the Lions have stockpiled a ton of those guys, those smaller, competitive, gritty corners. Amik Robertson falls into that category. Rock is a little thicker and a little more physical. I think Rock's a little stronger than all of those guys. Abney's really smart in zone also, from what I have seen. I could see a scenario in 2026 where Abney competes with some of the guys they brought in. I'm talking about McCreary and Isaiah. I like McCreary. I liked his film coming out of Auburn 2 or 3 years ago, but he's moved around some. Personally, I don't think that DJ Reed and Terrion Arnold should play 100% of the snaps. There's a 17-game season. There's a lot to be said about using multiple guys. Seattle has done that in recent years, using multiple corners. It's something that Jesse Minter does a ton of, trying to rotate guys in and out. Am I saying that Reed and Arnold should be off the field like 25% of the time? No. I'm talking about, 8, 10, maybe 12% of the time. Get some of these other guys in there if they're capable, if they're actually, showing you that they can handle that responsibility. I like this pick. This is kind of a similar perspective with Rolder, except I'm coming at it from another direction. Again, the merging of the 4th and 5th round talent is a point that I want to make. I said it before the draft. In fact, I forget which stream it was talking about this draft, and I'll put it to you this way. I think there's a lot of Keith Abneys, Chandler Rivers in this draft. Maybe a lot of Rolders as well. Guys, really good football players. Do what they're asked to do. They've got high-level intelligence and play with an edge about them, right? Even though in this case, Abney happens to be, like 5'9", 190. I like the pick a whole lot. In the 5th round for me, based on the film that I've watched, this is an A pick. Does it mean that I think he's going to start in 2026? No. I think he's got potential. I think he could develop into a guy who starts and plays a lot of snaps at the NFL level, hopefully in Detroit. All right, moving on to the Lions' next 5th round pick, Kendrick Law. I think they traded up to take him, but I could be wrong. He's only taken, I believe, 11 picks after Abney, which is kind of crazy because watching the film of the two guys, I just have a different perspective. But let's go over some of the particulars in the progression. He was at Alabama for 3 years, and they couldn't figure out a way to get him the ball. That's one way to describe it. Another one that was said to me by a hardcore Alabama fan in our Ravens Discord was Kendrick Law couldn't find his way on the field. But at Kentucky, a lot of screens, bubbles. He averaged pretty consistent 10 yards per catch in 3 years at Alabama, and I think 10.2 in one season at Kentucky, 2025. Kind of quick, man. 4'4", 5'40", 5'11". I believe he's just over 200 pounds. Looked a little smaller on film, to be honest with you. When I saw the measurables, 203, 205, somewhere in that range. So I'm going to give you some observations from games that I watched months ago. I watched the Vanderbilt-Kentucky game, not live, wasn't there in the stadium. For obvious reasons, I watch it. My nephew plays at Vanderbilt. He just wasn't very productive that game, Kendrick Law. Maybe 2 catches. And the week before, Law had 11 catches, but it was against Tennessee Tech. He is a big play guy at times, right? I'm just not sure what's there for him in Detroit. He's got some kick return ability. I think he's actually thrown a couple of passes in his career. One last year at Kentucky. I don't believe he completed any to my knowledge. I think this is an uphill climb. Talented, don't get me wrong. Drafted late in round 5. I was a little surprised that Detroit didn't touch tight end at all. But where they didn't have picks, right? Round 3 and then selecting Rolder with round 4, those 2 rounds to me, 3 and 4, was where a lot of the tight ends went. As this pick is made, Kendrick Law, Josh Cuevas is still on the board. He's one of my personal favorites. He's short measurables, though, so similar to Abney and Chandler Rivers. Cuevas actually went to the Ravens, but he's a guy that I talked about for weeks leading up to the draft. Here's some other players that are there, all right? Zane Durant, defensive tackle from Penn State. He goes to the Bills with, I believe it's the last pick in round 5. Look, maybe I'm wrong. And there's other information out there at this point that solidifies what Law could possibly do. It's just tough for me to see him on this team. You got significant talent there at wide receiver with the first 3 guys, clearly. Greg Dortch he's great on screens. He's a veteran, smaller and quick as well. Very tough. And Greg Dortch makes people miss after the catch, just like Kendrick Law does. But to me, Greg Dortch wins on routes against NFL DBs sometimes. Did I think that wide receiver needed some talent there at the back end? Maybe. Tom Kennedy, Jackson Meeks, those guys are still there. Other players that were on the board, they're still in Detroit, on the roster. Other players that were on the board, Riley, I think it's Nowakowski, the tight end from Indiana, I believe is number 37. He was actually taken with the next pick, but he's more of a blocking tight end. I guess when I'm mentioning tight end, I'm talking about the uncertainty with Laporta. Those are guys that were on the board. For me, it's tough to watch this one and say, given what I just said about the 5th round with Keith Abney being there, it was only 11 picks later. It's shocking to me. When I watch the Abney film or some of the stuff with Kendrick Law, I just have a drastically different opinion. Here's what I mean. Now, he did make some big plays. He had a touchdown against Tennessee, all right? He had 6 catches against Georgia, which is, real numbers and real level of competition, obviously. But over 20% of his catches in 2025 and over 20% of his yards was against Tennessee Tech in that one game, the week before they played Vanderbilt. 11 catches, 124 yards. Could he be a Khalif Raymond replacement? I understand that comparison. Personally, I like Dortch and those 2 guys. It's good to have some overlap, right? Dortch is a veteran, been around. Kendrick Law, somewhat similar skill set. I just think Dortch is far more able to win on actual routes down the field. We'll see in the preseason what Kendrick Law can do. I'm less impressed with his film. Well, I'm less impressed with his film than I want to be honest with you. I would love to sit here and say that I think every pick is an A-level pick. By the time they got to this area of round 5, there wasn't much available. But again, 11 picks sooner, Keith Abney was taken, and I really like his game a whole lot. Once you've watched just as much film as we all have for our website, draftsignal.pro, and when I say we, I mean a core group of about 8 guys that either, collaborate and talk often or loosely were connected to each other. Usually I'm the center point there. And what I mean is like Edgar Allen, Coach Evans, Jake Howlett, who was really right there 50-50 with me for the draft. A couple of other Ravens guys, Will Rock, Easy, 3 different Seahawks guys, and even one Bengals fan we're all able to watch so much film that, to me, when you get to situations like this next player, which is Skylar Gill Howard, he's got a great story, okay? He played for Texas Tech. That was his third college team. He's number 0. Look, it's really hard to stand out on that defense, right? David Bailey, Romello Height, Lee Hunter, the D tackle, who I think went in the second round. Maybe it was the third. Jacob Rodriguez, the other inside linebacker, is a special player as well. Skylar Gill Howard, right? 6'1", maybe 6'2", 285 in that range. Had some good moments. He's number 0, as you can see on the screen. Had some good moments for Texas Tech. It's just very difficult to stand out. Having said all that, the Lions certainly have a need at D tackle. Someone who's consistently available. You've got Aleem McNeil, Tyleek Williams, Levi Onwuzurike, Mekhi Wingo. I do kind of like what we saw from, I think it's Chris Smith, maybe in the 6'2", 310, 315 range. Comparing Smith to Gill Howard, just the little bit of film that I saw of Chris Smith last year, different size player, different level athlete. I don't want to be too harsh on this pick because, like I said, it's a great story. It is awesome to listen to Gill Howard talk about, and others talk about his journey. Right, I think he funded or worked to pay for his own schooling at one point to play football, 3 different schools. Here's some of the other D tackles that are out there at the time that he's selected. I think it's Jordan Vanderberg from Georgia Tech, Gabriel Rubio from Notre Dame. I have no inclination as to which of those 3 guys is better than the other. What I will say is there's snaps out there on the field for someone since DJ Reader's gone, right? And, of course, now we're past the comp pick formula time. And Brad Holmes, I think, did a fantastic job in free agency, not bringing in high-level talent, but bringing in guys who maybe they don't raise the floor, but I continue to use this phrase, they strengthen it. DJ Reader's gone, so someone needs to step up to Wingo, Onwuzurike, Chris Smith, even Miles Adams, I think, is still on the roster. He's actually a little underrated. To me, Gill Howard's going to have to develop quickly and stay healthy, which he did have trouble doing. At 2 of the 3 stops in college, he had injury concerns. So, like I said, I like the story and all of that, but right now it's going to be very difficult for this guy to stick around very long, if you ask me, if, in fact, he's able to stay healthy. I know this ends up being a really long video, but I wanted to give each pick some serious consideration. And this last one is interesting. Tyree West, an edge defender, D-end, maybe a little bit of a hybrid from Tennessee, recruited actually kind of highly out of high school. He was round 7 pick. You can see 222. He played well in the Senior Bowl, and I think had a lot of pressures each of the last, I think, 3 seasons. There's a high number of pressures, okay? He didn't play a ton at Tennessee, though, it has to be said. Really good size, 6'2", 285. I think he's a D-end. I think he's a big edge. And when I see him at his best, I did watch a lot of Tennessee film for obvious reasons. They're in the SEC, number 1. But number 2, Joshua Josephs was the edge on the other side. It was more of a speed rush, pass rush type guy. As far as West goes, when I see him in a best-case scenario, I see Roy Robertson Harris, a guy with a big wingspan, played boundary side D-end in some run situations, but West really he never lived up to his recruiting situation. He originally committed to Georgia and then switched to Tennessee like kind of late in the process. I do like that Brad Holmes and those guys went out and got 2 D-line bodies here near the end, right? They could develop. I mean, Gill Howard or West could develop. West, to me, looks like I can see a more clear path to him having a defined role, not necessarily in 2026, but beyond. But he was consistently a guy that Tennessee people wanted to see more out of, and he did get a lot of opportunities to get on the field. But he was never a starter, more of a rotational guy, at least from what I saw on film. Because when you go to certain places and you can get the film, and the film's only like 3.5 minutes long from one game, you're like, all right, maybe he got hurt or something like that. And then you get 2 or 3 or more films sent to you, and those plays are basically created. They only have that player on the field, and they're normally spot shadowed for easy access. And each one is only 3.5, 4 minutes long. It lets you know that the guy's not on the field a whole lot. I will say this overall: I do like this draft, particularly because of these two guys, Moore and Miller. I did expect Detroit to touch tight end. I did expect them to go get a tight end, but they got rid of a 4th-round pick, which would have been a great spot to do so in order to change because the math had changed on them, as far as Derrick Moore goes. And so I don't criticize that or decry it at all. To me, Rolder and even Abney will be kind of hinge points in how this draft is evaluated, 2 or 3 years later. And what I mean is, if Rolder becomes a good special teams player, maybe contributes some at inside linebacker, it's difficult for me to see him even being like a Rodriguez. I think Rodriguez, before his ACL injury, Rodriguez could have gone to other teams in the NFL and played more snaps, in my opinion. So that 4th-round pick for Rolder will be one that we'd like to see develop more. As far as Abney goes, if he plays to his talent level, he's not a 5th-round talent in a typical draft, in my opinion. He's a 3rd-round talent. I think that's in line with what a lot of other people evaluated. Tight end, safety was 2 spots that a lot of us projected or wondered if Brad Holmes would go after. But between the injuries to Laporta, Kirby Joseph, and then obviously Brian Branch, who's going to be out for a significant amount of time. Maybe it's a top-heavy draft for Detroit, in that you have Moore and Miller. I think those are 2 spectacular picks. Young guys, high-level programs. Clemson film is no fun to watch in 2025. I have to be direct. I can't lie, especially the defensive side. With all the talent they had, T.J. Parker, Peter Woods, Avion Terrell, Wade Wood as well, good football player. I think he got drafted by the Texans in round 5. Perhaps I'm wrong in the round there, but Clemson was frustrating to watch on defense. When I went to watch the Blake Miller film, which was about a month before the draft, I went into it with a negative attitude, I have to tell you. I don't know what it is about the Clemson. Maybe it's because, their longtime defensive coordinator went to Oklahoma and things have just gone downhill and maybe a lot of coaches have moved on. The defensive side was tough for me to watch. And when I went and watched the Miller film, it was end zone angle film provided to me by Chris Aguilera, who I would consider to be an offensive line guru. I was shocked at how much I liked it. The Miller film, that is. So I think extremely highly. My personal favorite tackle for the draft was Max Ahinachor, but I think Miller is the guy who's more ready to play right now. Ahinachor went to the Steelers at 21, that whole crazy situation with Mekhi Lemon. I love the pick of Miller. I think he's obviously a day 1 starter. Great to have a quality, maybe even high quality backup in Larry Borum, and then a guy who's still trying to develop into an NFL level tackle in the case of Giovanni Manu. If you get consistent high level play from Miller at right tackle in the run game and pass pro, and Derrick Moore comes in and plays to his talent level, which you would expect from a guy who gave you the film that he did at Michigan. Go watch his USC game to see the best of what he can do. Destructive player, downhill, bulldozes the left guard once, bulldozes the left tackle once as well, tips a pass that's nearly intercepted. I think gets a sack on another play. A great pursuit in the case of Derrick Moore. Moore, to me, is the guy that if he is ready to play in 2026, Abney too. Abney is not going to start, but if he's called upon, like Rocky Sin was last year, then it's great to have Abney. It's great to have Rock Ya-Sin, in the holster again this year. Hopefully he can, I hate to say this the way it's going to sound, hopefully you don't need Rock to go on the field. Hopefully Terrion Arnold, DJ Reed, Brian Branch, Kirby Joseph are all healthy. But I like the quality players that have been built up in the secondary in case shit happens again, injuries. Moore doesn't fall under that at the edge position. This is a big one. The decision that was made to go get Moore over Zion Young, personally, the film that I watched and the evaluations that I did, I liked Moore better. And I'm not just saying that to you because you're a Lions fan and you happen to be listening. I said the same things to Ravens fans, that there was no pass rush development for Zion Young at all, other than a bull rush. Got great length, very, very strong, long arms and all that stuff, and great pursuit and range. Zion Young gets after the football. But the versatility of Moore, the technical ability, I think he's got better pass rush moves. The inside moves for Moore, basically going trying to go underneath the tackle, hit him through the B gap. If that translates and he can actually beat some of these tackles on that move, he can establish something. I wonder about the strength against high-level quality tackles as far as his bull rush stuff goes. I think Moore's ready to go. Of the Big Ten edges, Gabe Yakas, Denai Dennis Sutton, who went in the 4th round to the Packers, and Derrick Moore. I thought Moore was the best. And you may think, well, you're saying that, Coach, because he's a Maryland guy. Well, Denai Dennis Sutton's a Maryland guy as well. Actually, he grew up closer to me than Derrick Moore did. So point being, I liked Moore's talent better than the other Big Ten guys, Sutton and Yakas. And I actually probably like Moore better than Zion Young. But hey, as a Ravens fan, I'm super happy we got Zion Young as well. They'll be able to unleash him for, 20, 25, maybe 30 snaps a game because we got Trey Hendrickson, Mike Green, Tavius Robinson. Derrick Moore, if you ask me, is a great pick. High-level potential. Played football at a high level in Michigan. I know that, a high percentage of his sacks occurred against certain teams. Plays the game the right way. Very versatile. Drops out in coverage. Trained like a professional the last 2 years with Pernell McPhee as the outside linebacker DN coach there at Michigan. I think this is a really good draft. What grade would I put on it? The first 2 picks? A. Not having a 3rd-round pick is tough, but you got Isaac Tesla out of that. So I can't argue with that either. He had 6 touchdowns last year. Maybe it was 5, but he certainly is going to have an impact moving forward. Played really well, and we would expect him to develop, especially if Detroit can, get him on the field more in 11 personnel groups, or even, take Jameson Williams or Amon-Ra St. Brown off occasionally. I like the draft. I don't feel capable of giving it a complete grade, meaning A, B, whatever, and here's why. Because I don't know what I think of Rolder. It's entirely possible that I fire up the film specific to Rolder and I go and feel even stronger that he's a guy who would have been around for another 30 picks. But this is a more difficult draft to predict because there's such a glut of players who were good players, game ready at the NFL level from the late 2nd, early 3rd round, extending into the 5th. I think Keith Abney is an example of that. So is Chandler Rivers, the DB that I mentioned. It should also be qualified that wide receivers and corners and nickel DBs, slot corners, if you will, are all coming into the NFL a little bit more prepared for the pass game. It makes sense, right? The usage of the pass has trickled down to the high school level such that there's a lot of teams in high school that are throwing the ball more than 50% of the time, and some of them are bad teams. It actually ends up, I think, kind of hurting some of the bad teams because, there's more incomplete passes. It extends the game, and actually they end up losing by 35 points, where if they ran the ball and kept the clock running, they could maybe keep the game closer for longer and only end up losing by 14. That's maybe an issue for another day, but I'm relating it to the fact that there's more high-quality DBs and receivers that come into the NFL 7-on-7 is far bigger than it was 20 years ago when it, 7-on teams were really kind of first starting nationally. We had them, locally for years, but as far as, national 7-on-7 tournaments and stuff, those things are a huge deal now. It's a real dynamic, and I think it has an impact on the quality of corners that you see, and I think it could be one of the explanations for guys like Keith Abney and Chandler Rivers from Duke, who got drafted by the Ravens, to be available in the 5th round as guys who I think look really good. In any case, I'm comfortable with saying that this is a really good draft by the Lions. I am unsure of how to evaluate it, like I said, because of the Rolder situation in the 4th round. You're more than welcome to let me know if you think I'm just vacillating too much. I don't want to put a grade on it, absent having a more concrete way of evaluating Rolder. I know what I think of Keith Abney at this point. I know what I think of, the other guys that were taken at the end of the draft. Law, Gil Howard, and Tyree West. You heard me talk about those guys at length. In any case, if you guys enjoyed the video, please let me know in the comment section. I know I didn't show any film. I don't show college film on my channel at all. If you want to see some of my college takes or the things that I think about some of these players, you're more than welcome to follow me on Twitter. I'll share that in the description, number 1. Or number 2, possibly join my Discord, which is a part of my Patreon. I think it's $4.99 a month, and it gets you into a exclusive kind of protected Lions community, if you will, that's independent or free of any trolls, where you can just talk football however you want related to the Lions. In any case, appreciate you guys' time.